if you ever had the need to build a report for a client requiring a custom sort order, like being the one being displayed right now, you're going to want to stick around and watch the rest of this video. So let's have a look at a report I've done. I've got a report here that pulls some sales data from the AdventureWorks database. My query, I have put the query directly in here as text. My data source, AdWorks, AdventureWorks. I've got two parameters, a start and end date parameter. Those parameters can be seen on the top here. I've given those parameters default values, so I don't have to keep updating when I run them. If I run this report, you'll see it brings me back some sales data. This report is 48 pages long. Let me show you a way that I use to do an order by using a parameter and some dynamic SQL. Let's look at it now. So let's have a quick look at the query that actually returns my report data. In here, you'll see, first of all, importance, I'm connected to the AdventureWorks database. You'll see I've declared two variables, a start and end date, datetime variables, and I've given them default values, and I've included them in the sort, the order date filters here. This is the same filters I apply in my report. Obviously, when you execute this in the report, you'll exclude the two variables so that it will create the default parameters for you. I included those so we can just execute directly from here. And there's my result set. Returns 1,598 rows of data. And we can now order by. Let me keep to the caps. Order by sh dot. Let's have a look. sh dot customer ID if you wanted to write from here, and we could say ascending, and it will sort by customer ID for us. However, that is going to be a static sort of input part of the query, and you won't be able to change that if you leave it like that. So the next section, we're going to try and make this Dynamic SQL, and we're going to pass additional parameters or variables to do our sort order for us. Let's change this query into Dynamic SQL. So there's literally two ways of executing Dynamic SQL. We are just going to use the execute at SQL. It's a simple method, and it's effective. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I think it will serve as a solution that can work for you. So how do we change this to Dynamic SQL? We need to declare yet another variable at SQL, and we set that to varchar 4000. And then we have to place our query inside the at SQL variable. So we set at SQL equals, and we're going to put a single quote and a single quote. And I'm adding the single quotes just after the between, before the start and end date variables. And the reason for that is, and perhaps I can demonstrate, let's put that in there. The reason for that is simply the method I'm using will not have the parameters passed to it. So if I execute, it's going to say that the scalar variable start date is not declared because it's not inside my dynamic SQL. So to get past that, I'm going to separate my variables from my dynamic SQL. I'm going to extract them as I pass it into my @SQL variable. And to do so, what I have to do is add the following. So I put 3 single quotes, a plus another 3 single quotes, another 3 single quotes, plus sign, and then I'm going to pass 4 single quotes through to it. Now you'll immediately see, just add a plus there, you'll immediately see another problem with this query once I try and execute it. Let's do that. So it gives me this error, failed to convert date and or time from character string. So to deal with this, we need to change these dates to varchar because we basically concatenating varchar values with date values, and SQL doesn't allow you to do that. So we need to cast this as varchar, and we need to cast this as varchar. Just quickly, while we're busy with dates, if you are watching this from anywhere outside South Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, your date times might look different from what I'm showing you on screen here. Let's try and execute this now and see if it returns values. So it does. Perfect. So that's Dynamic SQL. And just to give you an idea of what it actually looks like, instead of executing it, I'm going to just quickly print it. Print @SQL. And let's just run that part of the query. And you'll see what's stored in that @SQL variable is actually a query that looks like that. Again, your date times might look different from mine, but it would still work. Just depends on your region settings. Right, so that is actually what we pass into the @SQL variable, and then we execute the @SQL variable, and it returns our result set. So if you're new to Dynamic SQL, hopefully this introduction was useful, and you can apply it in other places. It is important that we get this fundamental requirement sorted before we get into passing the sort by parameters for order by parameters. For those who have a bit more experience on SQL and report builder, you probably have some idea of where we're heading with this. Stick around. Right, so now that we've got our dynamic SQL set up, let's add a couple more parameters for our order by. So I'm going to declare a couple of variables here at order by 1. Make that varchar, I think 25 should cover us in terms of column length. And, sorry, just make sure there's no spaces. And declare order at ord direction 1. And we can make this varchar 4, should never be longer than that. And then let's give ourselves another at order by 2, varchar 25, and declare at order direction 2, varchar 4. Now, some of you might say, but Nico, it's not necessary to put all these declares in there, and you're absolutely right. We could have just done that, and it would have still worked, which is fine. Whichever way you choose, you can do it. Anyhow, so we've declared these new variables. Let's add them to our query. And scroll down. Last time we added the extra 4 single quotes. We are now going to reduce that to 3 again because we're adding a second part to our query. And we're going to do an order by, and single quote plus. And now we're going to add our first order by parameter or variable. Plus, we want to leave a blank space. So we have a single quote, space, single quote, plus. We're going to put the order direction here. And we can actually leave that as that and just run the first parameter and see what it does for us. I think it's odd direction. At odd direction. And let's pass a column name and a direction into our parameters here or variables here quickly. So let's make this one equals customer name. And let's make this one ascending. And let's just test this query quickly. Execute. And it should now be by customer name. And it is in the ascending direction. So that's brilliant. And let's change it to country just to make sure. And country, we can just make country. And let's try it again. And now it should be by country. So that's definitely working. Those parameters are passing well through there. But what happens if we don't pass any values to those parameters? See here, command completed successfully. And why is it not executing anything? Let's quickly print the at SQL here and see what result we get when we print it. There's nothing. So somewhere we're losing all of this information. If you know a little bit about SQL, you know that the moment you add a null to any string value, the string value becomes null. So we need to deal with nulls. So we can do a is null and say 1, and that will just sort by column 1. And we can say is null, and we can say, in the case where it's null, just always make it ascending. And let's have a look what happens if we pass this through. And all of a sudden now it is working for us again. I don't like doing this method of handling the nulls. The reason is we are assuming an order by 1, column 1, and we are assuming a direction of ascending, where I would much rather just return the normal order for the tables if there's no order selected. So the way I deal with it is with a larger is null at the beginning of my order by clause. So is null, all of this together, and let's just remove that and remove that. So not the whole thing. Remove that and remove that. So if the entire query is null up to here, all I want to return is the original 4 single quotes that I had there in the first place. So let's execute this now, and it runs. Let's look at the query results, and you'll see it looks exactly the way it looked without the order bys. But if we add an order by in, so let's say we want to order by store name this time, and we want to make it ascending, and let's execute it now. Now, if we look at the query, if you can see in the bottom there, it's got an order by store name ascending. And if we look at the results, we'll see the store names are now in alphabetical order. So that's one way of dealing with a null value passed. I've got two additional order bys here. Let's quickly add those in here as well. So, order by 2, order by direction 2, right between the comma and the order by 1. I'm now adding another plus, and I'm adding a comma this time, because remember, you need a comma separator between your order bys. And I'm adding a blank space after the comma. I'm adding my second order by variable and another blank space separated by 2 single quotes, and my second odd direction 2, and we should make that odd direction 2, and this should deal with it. But wait, what happens now if I have an order by 1 and an order by direction 1, but I leave order by 2 and order direction 2 blank nulls? Let's execute this and see. So it executed. Let's have a look at the message. Do you see that my first order by is now completely gone? The order by store name ascending. The reason for that is I've tested the null condition of this entire piece of script here. And because I've returned a null on order by 2 and order direction 2, it's caused the entire section from the order by here up to here to be null, and it's given it the default value of a single quote or 2 single quotes. So to deal with that, I'm going to do another is null right between the first order by and order direction to deal just with this section here. So if this is null, please return for me nothing. And I close that. So now I'm handling this if it's null, and I'm handling the entire thing if it's null. Let's execute now. And we go back to messages, and we'll see our order by store name is back again. Should we pass a secondary sort order variable? And let's call it country. And we make that say descending this time around, and we execute. We'll see that that is an alphabetical order, and now the countries are in alphabetical order descending. Let's have a look at the print. So you'll see it's order by store name ascending, order by country descending. This query here is ready to be inserted into our data for our report. A couple of things quickly. Let's remove that print SQL. Let's remove, or at least not copy this into our data source. And what we're going to have is this. Don't worry about the red underlinings. It's because we've commented out our variable declarations there. Copy, go to reports, and now you're going to paste it into your report query here, or you can encapsulate it in a store prop. That's up to you. But for demonstrations, I've already pasted this in here. The only difference between this and what I'm displaying on screen is I haven't converted my dates to a specific format. Other than that, it's identical. your reports query should be accepted and should create the following parameters for you: start date, end date, order by one, order by two, order direction two. In the next section, we're going to look at how do we populate those order by drop-down lists and how do we allow them to be null. So stick around. With your query window open in SQL Server Management Studio, we are going to begin with creating a temporary table where we're going to hold the information required for our drop-down select list for our columns. To do this, we're going to create a temporary table. If you're not familiar with temporary tables, this might be a good introduction. If you are familiar with it, you might want to skip forward. In any case, let's just get into it. So firstly, when we're dealing with temporary tables, it's always a good idea to first check if it does exist. So if object ID, and we're going to check in a temp database, pound, and I'm going to call mine columns. And we're going to check if it's not null. Begin. Let's say drop table, hashtag columns. I frequently refer to it as hashtag. The correct term is probably pound. The next step is to create the table. As I said, we're going to call this columns. First column, I'm going to do column value, and I'm going to declare this as a varchar 25. Now, my column lengths will fit into varchar 25. It's try to figure out how much space or what the length of those columns are to give yourself enough bits or space in your temporary table columns to cater for those columns. So the next one I'm going to do is column text, and that's going to be a varchar 35 in my case. And in here, I'm going to insert into columns, and obviously just again specify the column order that you want to insert. Hopefully that's correct. Values, and then we're going to start inserting our column names from our prior query, because we're going to pass these column names into our query as the sort by columns. So we need to be very exact in terms of the column names. And this is exactly why I want to make it a drop-down list, to prevent users from typing any value in there, or perhaps an incorrect value in there, and then the query not working. So let's add our column names. I'm going to open bracket, and the first one I'm going to add is the cell's order number. By the way, you can also use this to restrict the columns they can do a sort by or order by. So if you don't, for instance, want them to be able to order by something like user date or whatever, you can remove it from this select or insert text. I'm going to copy the rest of these in. You get the main idea. So let's copy my remaining columns in there. If you want, you can type it out. If you also wanted to, you could copy paste your result set from your query into Excel. I would then copy the column headers out, paste special, transpose that into Excel, copy that back into SQL, and then use that as my values for my insert. All right, so now that I've got those values that I'm inserting, I should be able to select them from my new temp table. And let's execute this query and see what it returns. And it does exactly what we expected it to do. Now, I'm going to add something else to this query, because I want to be able to give a default parameter selection of null And to do so, I find it's easier to just create a result set here that contains the nulls. So before I select star from columns, I'm going to go and select null as column value and null as column text. And I'm going to union all with the star, select star from columns. If I execute that now, my first row contains the nulls and my rest is populated with the columns from my query. So this is perfect for our first column dropdown, and we're going to do something interesting with our second one. So stick around for that. We're going to copy and paste now this into our report. We're going to copy that query into a new data set. I'm going to just call this column 1. Use data set embedded in reports. I'm going to select my AdventureWorks data stores. Paste my query in there, refresh it, say OK, and I should have that result set there. So next we need to populate our order by with the values in there, but I want to do another query for my order by 2. So for order by 2, I'm going to use more or less the same query, but there's going to be a slight difference in this one, which I'll explain to you now. Alright, so for our second parameter, sort order by parameter, we're going to just add to the exact same query, we're going to add where column value is not equal to at order by 1. Oh, my apologies. At order by 1 and at order by 1 is not null. So what this will do is it will firstly prevent us from selecting any columns from our temp table that's already been selected in our order by 1 parameter, which means if country is selected in order by 1, country will be dropped or will not be selected in our result set for the second order by parameter. Secondly, it's also checking whether order by 1 is selected. So if order by 1 is not selected, the user will not have the option to select anything but null from the order by 2 parameter. So we want to almost force order by 1 before order by 2 can be selected. If you think back to our query that we did for our result set, our report query, you'll remember that we were handling the nulls, and we handled the null exception by rolling back to the previous exception. So we first check if order by 1 is null, and if it's null, we roll back to no order by. If order by 1 is not null, we then check if order by 2 is null. If order by 2 is null, we roll back to order by 1. But if order by 2 is not null, but order by 1 is null, the result set will not pick up the order by 2 parameter that we are passing through to it. So in this case, we're really just preventing the user from selecting an order by 2 when an order by 1 is not selected. So we can copy this out and we can paste that into our data set. And this I'm just going to call column 2 data set. Use exactly the same method as previously. And now we have that second data set. That second data set third data set in this case for column 2 relies on the parameter order by 1 being selected. So your order by 1 definitely needs to be above your order by 2 parameter, otherwise your query won't execute. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to populate these order by 1 and 2 parameters with the default lists. from our two data sets. So stick around for that. Right, so let's double click order by one, and we can say order by column one, just to make it a bit more clear to the user. And let's say allow null values. Let's go available values. Now we can get values from a query, and we're going to go to column one. The value field becomes column value, and the label field becomes column text. And then on default, we're going to specify add and leave that as null. So by default, null will be selected, and the user will be able to select any one of the columns from our column one data set. And let's say OK. On order by two, we're going to do exactly the same thing. So general here, order by column two, allow null values. Available values get values from query, and this time we're going to go to dataset 2. Again, it's going to be value here and text there, and default specific values add and also leave that as null. Then next we want to go and populate our order directions. So let's open order direction 1, order dir 1, and we can just say column 1 sort order. This again will just clarify it for the user, and we can set the available values, specific values here. I'm just going to add them. I'm not going to run a select list for this. I'm going to say ascending, and then SQL, that is ASC, and we're going to go descending, and then SQL, that is DESC, and then none, and leave it as null, and then default values, specific values add, and also again leave this as null. So we must allow null values there also. So I'll copy that so I don't have to retype it. And then order direction 2. So we're going to go column 2, sort order, and now null values, available values, specific values, just add those same 3 values. So ascending, ASC, descending, oh goodness, DESC, none, and leave that as null, and then default values, specific values, add and leave that as null. So one final thing, I'm not a big fan of the default layout of my parameters here on top. If you're using an older version of Report Builder, you won't be able to do what I'm going to do next. But if you're using this newer version, you should be able to change the layout of your parameters. So the first thing is I'm going to insert a row above, and then I'm going to just drag these underneath each other. I'm going to delete those additional columns, and that's a lot neater. So let's run this quickly and see if it works. Right, so there's my result set. Obviously, I've got my default date parameters in there. And let's just say I want to order by the salesperson name, and I want to order that ascending, and view report. And there it is, sorted by salesperson name. And now on column 2, I shouldn't have salesperson name here. I do have surname, but not name anymore. And I'm going to try and sort by country now, because Amy's got a couple of countries there. Let's see if this works. Country, and let's do this ascending again. View report. And now that's sorted ascending. Let's do descending and just check if it works. And sort of descending. So that's one way of parameterizing your sort order or order by for a report in Report Builder. There is another method where you can use the auto buy directions on your row groups. I might add another video on how to do that a little bit later. I hope this helps. If it does help you, I would appreciate it very much if you would like this video, if you would subscribe to our channel, and also share this with your colleagues if you feel that could be useful for them. It's always much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to get more valuable training videos like this one.